Malia was just the invisible seamstress, mending silk suits in a windowless basement, while the most dangerous man in Seoul paced the marble floor above her head. Kang Do-yoon had 9 betrothed brides, a syndicate that swallowed cities, and a mountain estate where the wind itself seemed afraid to breathe. But he was missing the one thing his bloodline demanded, an heir. He had built walls out of bone and silence, so high no bullet could scale them, until the night he tore his own jacket on purpose, just to watch a black American girl with sewing needles in her apron thread him back together. What neither of them knew was that the first stitch she put in his skin would begin to unravel an empire. Welcome back to the channel, besties. Today we are stepping into a world of cold stone mansions, blood contracts, and a love so unlikely it rewrote a 300-year-old bloodline. Have you ever wondered what happens when the most feared man in a city, a man with 9 political brides waiting to marry him, a man who is killed for his crown, realizes the only woman who has ever really seen him is the one mending his suits in the basement? Today we're following the story of Kang Do-yoon, the Korean mafia lord they call the Lion, and the black American seamstress who walked into his compound with nothing but a pair of scissors and a dying mother, and somehow walked out holding the future of his entire empire in her hands. If you are ready for this journey, tap that like, subscribe to the family, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single chapter. Let's get into the story. Most people never noticed Malia Roberts. To the staff of the Kang compound, she was a pair of hands behind a door in the service wing, the quiet girl who returned every button, every hem, every torn lapel to a condition of pristine luxury before dawn. Her name did not appear on guest lists. Her face did not appear in photographs. She was a ghost whose only proof of existence was the perfection of other people's clothes. But before the sun ever rose over the estate, Malia was someone else entirely. In a third-floor hospital room that smelled of bleach and old grief, she sat beside her mother's bed holding a frail hand while a dialysis machine hummed its mechanical prayer. Mrs. Roberts had been a seamstress too once, in Chicago, before the kidneys began to fail and the savings began to vanish. Malia had taken her mother's trade the way other daughters inherit jewelry. It was the only thing they had left worth anything. She also had a younger sister, Tasha, 19 years old, and in her first year of university in Incheon. Tasha did not know how much her sister was paying to keep her there. Tasha did not know about the 3 evening shifts, or the loan sharks who had been following their father's unpaid debts from the grave like hungry dogs. Malia wanted her sister to keep not knowing. That was the only luxury she could still afford to give. The advertisement had been pinned to a laundromat corkboard in a district where no real opportunities were ever posted. Seamstress wanted. Discreet household. Live-out position. No questions. The pay was 5 times what any boutique in the city would offer. Malia did not ask why. She already knew. In Seoul, when the money is that good and the questions are not allowed, the household is always the same kind of household. She took the job anyway. While Malia counted hospital bills by flickering fluorescent light, Kang Do-yoon stood on the stone veranda of a mountain estate, watching the city below like a man watches a chessboard. He was 34. He had inherited the Kang syndicate at 26, after his father was shot in a parking garage in Busan. In 8 years, he had tripled the family's holdings, absorbed 3 rival factions, and pushed 2 international enforcement agencies into an awkward, unspoken truce with his operations. The newspapers called him a businessman. The underworld called him Sajanim, the Lion. He lived alone in a Hanok-inspired palace of black timber and pale stone, surrounded by 9 women he had never touched. The 9 betrothals had been arranged before his father's body was cold. Each of the 9 was the daughter of a Chaebol dynasty, a judicial family, or a political house. Each contract brought an alliance. Each contract promised, within a year of his 35th birthday, a wedding and an heir to carry the Kang name into the next century. He had signed all 9 because signing had been the only way to survive the year of knives that followed his father's death. He had intended, quietly, to marry none of them. The brides lived in a separate wing of the estate, a beautiful gilded aviary of silk hanbok and imported orchids. They took their meals together, traveled together, and competed for the same single prize with a smile so practiced it never reached their eyes. Do-yoon attended the scheduled weekly dinner because tradition demanded it. He spoke less than a dozen words across the whole meal. He never stayed for tea. What none of them knew was that the Kang doctor had delivered him the same quiet report for 3 years running. There was nothing wrong with him. The problem, the doctor had said carefully, was not biological. The problem was that a seed does not take root in cold ground, and the women he had chosen were not women. They were treaties. The thought of his bloodline ending with him used to keep him awake. Lately, he had stopped caring. That, more than anything, was how he knew he was already halfway dead. Malia's first week in the compound passed like a held breath. The tailoring room was in the east basement, behind a reinforced door that only opened with a thumbprint the housekeeper had pressed for her on day 1. There were no windows. There was a long oak table, 3 industrial sewing machines, a wall of threads arranged like a painter's palette, and a rack that held more handmade Italian wool than most boutiques in Seoul saw in a year. She was told never to leave the basement during daylight hours. She was told not to speak to any of the brides. She was told, above all, never to go to the 3rd floor. She was told nothing about the man who owned the house. On the 9th night of her employment, just after 2 in the morning, the reinforced door hissed open without warning. Malia was hand-finishing the lining of a silk hanbok jacket when she looked up and froze. A man stood in the doorway, tall, very still, dressed in what had once been a beautifully cut charcoal suit. The jacket was now torn at the shoulder. The white shirt beneath it was no longer white. There was blood on his collar, blood on his cuff, blood darkening the whole left side of his body in a slow, deliberate spread. For a long second he did not speak. He looked at her the way a lion looks at something it has not decided whether to kill. Malia did not scream. She had grown up the eldest of 2 in a neighborhood where men came home bleeding. She set down her needle, stood up, and walked straight toward him. "Sit down, sir," she said. "On the stool. Not the chair. The chair is upholstered." Something moved across his face. Not a smile. Something more surprised than that. He sat. She cut the ruined shirt away from his shoulder with her shears. The wound was a through and through, already beginning to clot, clean and small, and the kind of thing she had seen her father patch up in backrooms in Englewood, Chicago, 100 times before the cancer took him. Her hands worked without her mind. She cleaned it with the alcohol she kept for needles. She threaded a curved suture needle from her emergency kit. She told him it would hurt. He did not flinch once. She stitched him closed with the same careful, invisible stitch she used for silk. When she was done, she realized 3 things at once. The man had not taken his eyes off her face the entire time. The blood was expensive blood, the kind that belonged to someone whose name was on the deeds of the walls around her. And she had broken the first rule of the house without even noticing. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, stepping back. "I should have called someone. I wasn't thinking." "You were thinking," he said. His voice was low and strangely gentle. "You just weren't afraid. It's different." He stood up. He was taller than she had realized. Up close, she could see the faint scar that ran along his jaw, the dark intelligence in eyes that were not quite black. He picked up the ruined jacket, looked at it, and then looked at her. "What is your name?" "Malia, sir. Malia Roberts." "Malia." He said it carefully, the way a man tastes a word he intends to keep. "The jacket is ruined. Replace it by morning." "Yes, sir." He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. Without turning around, he said, "You did not ask who shot me." "It wasn't my business, sir." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "No, it wasn't." The door hissed shut behind him. Malia stood in the middle of the basement with a bloody needle still in her hand and realized her knees were shaking. Not from fear. From the fact that for the first time in 2 years, someone had looked at her as though she was an actual person, and not a service being rendered. She stayed up all night finishing the replacement jacket. She did not sleep. She did not tell anyone what had happened. Neither did he. The next evening, a suit came down the chute with a ripped inner seam along the right sleeve. Malia mended it and sent it back up. The evening after that, a different suit came down with a missing button and a scorched lapel, as though someone had pressed a lit cigarette against the fabric on purpose. Malia mended that one too. By the end of the second week, She had repaired 9 of Kang Do-yoon's suits. A different accident each night. A split pocket. A torn cuff. A cigarette burn on a collar no one could possibly have reached by accident. On the 15th night, a pair of trousers arrived with a thumb-sized hole punched neatly through the knee, as though pressed through by the tip of a single sharp object. Malia sat in her basement staring at that trouser leg for a long time. Then she picked up her needle and mended it. She knew. She had known since the scorched lapel, if she was being honest. A house like this did not have accidents. A man like the one she had stitched up that first night did not ruin his own wardrobe by carelessness. He was doing it on purpose. He was doing it so she would have to be summoned. He was doing it so that once a day, someone would knock on the basement door and say Sajanim asks when the repair will be ready, and she would walk up the stairs with a finished garment and deliver it into his hands in the private study on the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor. The floor she had been told never to go to. That was where she met him every evening now. The study was all dark wood and low lamps. There was a chessboard by the window that always seemed to be mid-game, though she never saw him play. He would stand when she entered. He would take the garment from her hands without looking at it. He would ask her one question, always different, always quiet. Have you eaten today? How old is your sister? Is the wool too heavy for this season? Tell me honestly, what did your father do in Chicago? She would answer. He would listen as though he were memorizing her. Then he would say, "Thank you, Miss Roberts," and she would return to her basement. And her heart would pound for a full hour afterward as though she had just walked along the edge of something very high. She never told him she had figured out the game with the suits. She did not have to. The night she arrived with the mended trousers, he took them from her and said very quietly, "I needed a reason to see you that wouldn't cost you your dignity. I'm sorry, it was the best one I could think of." Malia stared at the carpet. "You are a powerful man, sir," she said. "You did not need a reason." "I did," he said. "With you, I did." She left the study without answering. She did not sleep that night either. The thing about a gilded aviary is that the birds inside always know when something has changed in the garden. On the morning of the 23rd day, Malia was summoned to the east drawing room. She had never been inside it before. She assumed one of the brides needed an alteration. The first bride, Yoon Seo-ah, was standing by the window. She was beautiful the way a knife is beautiful. Her hanbok was the color of dried blood. She did not turn around when Malia entered. "Sit." Malia sat. "Do you know," Seo-ah said, still facing the window, "how many women have tried to climb into this house through the servant's door?" "I don't know, ma'am. More than you would think. Fewer than there should be, because most of them do not survive the attempt." She turned. Her face was very calm. "You have been summoned to the 3rd floor 7 times this week. I was delivering repaired garments, ma'am, for 34 minutes on Tuesday. He asked me about the fabric." Seo-ah walked across the room in slow, measured steps. She stopped in front of Malia's chair. She was wearing a perfume that smelled of cold metal and white flowers. "I am going to tell you something, Miss Roberts, because I am a fair woman and I believe in warnings. You are not the first girl with pretty eyes to be noticed by a bored king. You will not be the last. When this passes, and it will pass, you will not be the one who is discarded. You will be the one who is erased. Do you understand what I am saying?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." The slap came without warning. It was not hard enough to break skin. It was hard enough to make Malia's ears ring. Seo-ah's rings left a small, raised line across her cheekbone that would still be visible in a mirror 3 days later. "Next time I hear your name on the 3rd floor," Seo-ah said calmly, "it will not be my hand that finds you. Leave." Malia stood up. She did not cry. She bowed, as she had been taught to do, and walked out of the drawing room with the same steady step she had used walking in. That afternoon, she went to the housekeeper and submitted her notice in writing. She did not tell Do-yoon. She did not leave a message. She packed her small bag, collected her final envelope, and walked through the service gate just before sundown. She took the train back to the hospital, sat down beside her mother, and did not move for 9 hours. She thought she had closed a door. She had no idea she had just lit a fuse. Do-yoon did not realize she was gone until the following evening, when a torn cuff went down the chute and was returned an hour later mended by hands that were not hers. He knew immediately. The stitch was wrong. It was good, it was competent, but it was not hers. Her stitch was almost invisible. The stitch that came back was merely neat. He walked down the east basement himself. The tailoring room was empty. The thread palette had been straightened by someone who did not understand the color order she had been keeping it in. He found the housekeeper in the kitchen. "Where is Miss Roberts?" "Sajanim, she resigned yesterday. She left by the service gate at sunset." "Why?" "She did not say, Sajanim." He stood there in the kitchen in a house he owned, in a life he had built, and felt something quiet and very old detonate behind his sternum. He spent the next 2 hours on the phone. By midnight, he knew 3 things. Malia's personnel file had been flagged by the first bride's attendant that morning. Her mother was on dialysis in a public hospital in Incheongu, and the district her family lived in was under the informal collection of the Namgu outfit, a rival syndicate his father had never bothered to crush because they kept to their own garbage. He read her address 3 times. He read the amount listed under declared family debt twice. The second number made him close his eyes. Namgu had been bleeding her for over a year. He got in the car alone. He drove himself. He did not go to her apartment. He went to the hospital first. It was 2 in the morning and the ward was silent but for the slow mechanical breathing of the machines. He found the room by the number on her file. Malia was asleep in a plastic visitor's chair, still in her travel coat, her hand wrapped loosely around her mother's. There was a small bandage on her cheekbone where the ring had cut her. There was a half-eaten convenience store rice ball in her lap. She looked so tired that for a moment he could not breathe around it. He stood in the doorway for a long time. He had walked into houses where men were dying on the floor and felt nothing. He stood in a hospital doorway at 2 in the morning and felt every single one of those rooms arrive in him at once. He did not wake her. He walked to the nurse's station, laid down a black card, and paid every outstanding bill on Mrs. Roberts' account in a single transaction. He requested, quietly, a private room and a specialist transfer to the Yonsei Medical Center by morning. He signed his own name on the paperwork because he was, at that moment, past the point of caring who knew. Then he walked back into the room, sat down in the chair on the other side of the bed, and waited for her to wake up. She woke just before dawn. She saw him sitting there, and for one long second she thought she was dreaming. "Sir," she whispered. "What are you? Who hit you?" "It doesn't matter, sir." "Malia." His voice was very quiet. "Who hit you?" She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. "Miss Yoon," she said. "It's fine. I resigned. It's over." He was silent for a long moment. "And Namgu?" Her head came up sharply. All the blood went out of her face. "How do you? How long have they been taking your money?" "Sir, please." "How long, Malia?" 14 months, she said. The words came out cracked. "They said it was my father's debt. They come every other Friday. If I'm short, they wait by the hospital." He looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was almost conversational. "Your mother is being moved to Yonsei this morning. Car will come for you at 7. Your sister is being relocated to on-campus housing by noon. You do not need to pack anything at the apartment. You will not be returning to the apartment." "Sir." "Miss Roberts." He stood up. "I am asking you one question, and I need you to answer it truthfully. Do you want me to handle Namgu? Or do you want me to walk out of this hospital and pretend I never saw you?" She looked at him. She saw very clearly for the first time the lion the city was afraid of. "Handle them," she whispered. He nodded once. Then he leaned down, touched the bandage on her cheek with a tenderness that did not seem to belong to the same man, and walked out of the room. 2 hours later, 3 senior men of the Namgu organization were removed from the syndicate's books, permanently. The family ledger on Malia's father's debt was delivered to Do-yoon's desk by breakfast, along with a written apology in blood ink that the Namgu elder had signed himself. By the end of the week, the apartment building where the Roberts had lived for 6 years had been quietly bought, renovated, and reassigned to a legitimate housing foundation. The street where the collection men had waited had been paved over. Malia never saw any of it. All she knew was that on a Tuesday morning, a driver arrived at 7, and her mother was wheeled into a hospital room with a view of Namsan Tower, and the dialysis ran smoothly for the first time in 2 years. He did not take her back to the main estate. He took her to the Polonia house. It sat on a cliff on the east coast, accessible only by a single private road that wound up through pine forest for 6 kilometers before the gate appeared. No one outside 3 trusted men even knew the property existed. It was not in any deed registry under his name. It was the one place in the world where he was no one's lion. It was a single-story hammock built around a central courtyard, ringed by the Polonia trees that gave the place its name. The Polonia was an old symbol in Korea, the tree where the phoenix was said to nest, the wood reserved in antiquity for the cradles of royal children. His grandmother had planted these trees with her own hands when she was a young bride. She had not lived to see any of them bloom. Malia arrived in late afternoon with her mother asleep in a medically equipped car and her sister wide-eyed in the back seat. A small staff of 3 received them, a chef, a nurse, and a woman who did nothing but quietly tend to the house. Mrs. Roberts was installed in a warm, sunlit room with a hospital bed and a view of the sea. Tasha was given her own room, a desk, and a full wardrobe she had not asked for. Malia herself stood in the center of the courtyard and did not know where to put her hands. Do-yoon came out to her as the sun began to set. He had changed out of the suit he had worn in the city. He was in soft dark clothes and his feet were bare on the wooden floor. "You don't have to work here," he said. "You don't have to do anything. Your mother's care is covered for the rest of her life. Your sister's tuition is paid through her doctorate, if she wants one. You are under my protection, which means no one will ever again come to a door looking for money you do not have. Do you understand me, sir? Do-yoon." She looked at him. "Do-yoon," she said. It was the first time she had spoken his name out loud. Felt like stepping off a bridge. "Good," he said softly. "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved in the Polonia leaves above them. "Come inside," he said. "I will tell you, but not sober." The storm rolled in from the sea just after 9. Rain came down in sheets against the tile roof. The wind bent the Polonia branches until they scraped the courtyard stones. The power did not go out, but the lamps flickered, and the whole house seemed to hold its breath. She found him on the wide veranda facing the ocean, a bottle of 20-year Anong soju half empty on the low table beside him. He was not drunk, but he was not sober either. His jacket was off. The scar along his jaw looked deeper by lamplight. She sat down across from him. He poured her a small cup without asking and set it in front of her. "I was 23, he said. He did not look at her. He looked at the rain. Her name was Wonjiru. Her mother was Kenyan. Her father was Korean. She was a violinist. She was 21 years old, and she laughed at me the first time I told her what my family did, because she thought I was joking. When she realized I wasn't, she did not run. That is how I knew I loved her. No one had ever not run before." Malia did not move. "We were together for 11 months. I was going to break the 9 betrothals. My father had just signed the last of them, and I was going to break them all. I told Wonjiru this on a Thursday. On the Saturday, my father's rival sent a car through the intersection where she was waiting for me. They did not shoot her. They did not need to. They just drove through her. A message. A reminder. You do not get to love outside the contract." Malia's hand had gone to her mouth. "I did not cry," he said. "I killed the man who ordered it. I killed the 2 men who drove the car. I killed the man who told them which street she would be waiting on. And then I went back to my father's house and I signed the 9 contracts myself, because I understood then that love was a door and every door in my life was a place where a bullet could come through. I vowed on Wonjiru's grave that I would never open that door again." He finally turned to look at Malia. "I have kept that vow for 11 years. I have not touched a single one of the brides. I have not taken a lover. I have not even wanted to. I told myself the part of me that could want had died on that street with her. I believed it. I believed it until I came down into a basement with a hole in my shoulder and saw a girl who didn't flinch, who told me to sit on the stool because the chair was upholstered, and I realized the part of me that had died had only been sleeping. His voice was very low. I have ruined 9 suits trying to have an excuse to see your face. I have lied to my own household. I have turned over a rival syndicate for a debt that did not belong to me. I have brought you to the one place in the world that is mine, that no one can find, because I cannot stand the thought of anything in this life touching you. I don't know what that makes me. I don't know if you want it. I do not deserve for you to want it. But I cannot keep pretending, Malia. Not to you. Not anymore. The rain hammered against the roof. The lamp guttered. Malia reached across the low table and took his hand. Do-yoon, she said. He closed his eyes. I am not Wanjiru, she said very softly. I will not die on a street because you love me. I have survived worse men than you over a dining table this week alone. If you open that door, I will not be standing on the other side of it waiting to be hit by a car. I will be standing on the other side of it with my own hand on the frame. He opened his eyes. There were tears in them. She had not known a man like this could have tears in him. Then come here, he whispered. She stood up. She walked around the low table. She took his face in her hands the way she had taken the torn silk of his jacket, carefully, the way a seamstress touches something she intends to make whole. And then she kissed him. The storm kept going. The paulownia trees bent in the wind. Somewhere out on the sea, a ship's light pulsed once and then was gone behind the rain. Inside the paulownia house, the lion who had not wept in 11 years wept against the shoulder of a seamstress from Chicago. And a vow made on a grave in the rain of another storm finally, quietly ended. That night, for the first time in both of their lives, neither of them slept alone because they had to. They slept together because they had chosen to. And inside Malia, in a body that had never stopped making life even while the world was trying to take it, the answer to a 300-year question began, silently, to form. 6 weeks passed at the paulownia house like a held breath. Malia's mother improved. The color came back to her face. She began to sit up, then to stand, then to walk the courtyard in the mornings with her younger daughter's arm through hers. Tasha enrolled in a better program at her university and visited on weekends. The staff of 3 grew quietly to 5, then 7, all handpicked by Do-yoon, all bound by contracts so tight no whisper of the household ever reached the outside world. Do-yoon drove the mountain road every night. He would leave the city at 7 and arrive in time for dinner. He stopped attending the weekly bride's dinner entirely. He stopped attending most of his own meetings. His lieutenants began to whisper. He did not care. On the morning of the 43rd day, Malia fainted in the courtyard. She woke up in her own bed with the house doctor, an old Kang family physician named Dr. Bae, standing over her. Do-yoon was in the corner of the room with his arms crossed so tightly across his chest that his knuckles were white. Sajanim, Dr. Bae said carefully. I would like to speak to you in the hall. Speak here. Sajanim, it concerns? Speak. Here. Dr. Bae looked at Malia. Malia nodded. Miss Roberts is pregnant, the doctor said. Approximately 6 weeks. The fainting is common and not serious. Her iron is low and we will correct it. Do-yoon did not move. He did not speak. He looked at Malia as though the floor had just dropped out from under him. There is more, Sajanim. Then say it. I performed an extended ultrasound because the hormone levels were unusually high. Miss Roberts is carrying twins. A boy and a girl. The silence that followed had weight. Twins, Do-yoon said. There is one additional finding. Dr. Bae hesitated. I flagged a particular marker on the preliminary screening, and I want to be cautious about it, but Sajanim, you asked me many years ago to watch for this. The female twin carries the Bikak marker, the paulownia marker. In the Kang bloodline, it has not appeared in 9 generations, Do-yoon said quietly. Yes, Sajanim. Malia looked from one man to the other. What does that mean? Do-yoon crossed the room and sat down on the edge of her bed. He took both of her hands in both of his. When he looked up at her, his eyes were wet. "It means my grandmother was right," he said. "She planted the Polonia trees because she believed the prophecy. The Kang line ends when the phoenix returns to the Polonia. 9 generations, Malia. No one in my family has carried that marker in 9 generations. My father did not believe in it. I did not believe in it. My grandmother was buried believing in it alone." His hand shook as he touched her stomach. "Our daughter carries it." Malia closed her eyes. Tears ran down her temples into her hair. "Do-yoon," she whispered. "They will come for them, won't they? The moment anyone finds out." "Yes," he said. "They will." "Then what do we do?" He lifted her hand to his mouth. He kissed the inside of her wrist, where her pulse beat. "I end the empire," he said, "before the empire ends us." 3 days later, Kang Do-yoon returned to the main estate for the first time in 6 weeks. The 9 brides were summoned to the Great Hall. They arrived in their finest hanbok, in matched silks the color of plums and storm clouds, each one believing privately that she had finally been chosen. He did not sit at the head of the room. He stood. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was even. "I have called you here to inform you, personally, before you read it in any document, that the 9 betrothal contracts signed between your families and the Kang household 8 years ago are being dissolved. Effective immediately. In full." The silence lasted precisely 1 second before it erupted. He did not raise his voice. He waited. When the hall had quieted enough for him to be heard, he continued. "Each of your families will receive a settlement that will keep your houses solvent for 3 generations. The political alliances the contracts were intended to secure will be honored through other means. Your families will not lose face. You will not lose face. You will be free to marry where you wish. You will be free to never see me again. I am told that for most of you this will come as a relief. For the ones for whom it is not, I am sorry, and I hope in time you will come to see that I have given you a gift by releasing you from a house that was never going to love you." Yoon Seo-ah stood up. Her face was the color of ash. "Who is she?" Do-yoon looked at her for a long moment. "Someone who did not climb through a servant's door," he said softly. "Someone I walked down into a basement to find. I will say this only once, Miss Yoon, and then you and I will never speak again. You struck her across the face in this house. If you had struck her hard enough to bruise the child she is carrying, I would not be standing here dissolving a contract. I would be standing here burying you. Do you understand the mercy I am extending to you right now?" Seo-ah sat down. No one spoke again. He did not stop there. Over the following 90 days, Kang Do-yoon did what no lord of the Kang Syndicate had ever done. He called in every captain. He divided the territories into 3 independent operations. He handed each one to a trusted lieutenant along with its entire revenue stream, its protection contracts, and a written promise that the Kang name would not be invoked against them for a period of 100 years. He dissolved the central command structure that his great-grandfather had built. He returned the Black Ledger, the one with 3 centuries of names in it, to the Kang ancestral shrine and had it sealed. The underworld did not understand. Rival syndicates circled, waiting for the collapse. It did not come. The 3 new operations held. The lieutenants had been chosen well. The transition was so clean that by the time anyone outside the family realized what had happened, there was no center left to strike. Kang Do-yoon walked away from the throne his father had been shot for, and he did it while the throne was still warm. He kept 3 things. The Polonia house, a fund large enough to protect his family for 4 generations, and a promise made quietly to 3 of his oldest men, that if anyone ever came looking for the twins, the response would be final. He kept nothing else. The twins were born on a clear morning in early spring. The boy came first. They named him Kang Hanul, which means sky. He had his father's quiet eyes and his mother's hands, long-fingered and patient even as an infant. The girl came second, 6 minutes later. They named her Kang Jae-woo, which means wisdom. She was small. She was loud. On the inside of her left ankle, there was a faint, pale crescent-shaped birthmark that Dr. Bae, watching, had to turn away to compose himself. The Polonia marker. the phoenix returning to the nest. Mrs. Roberts held her grandchildren before Amara did. It had been her one stubborn wish. She had recovered enough to stand, to walk, to cry. She whispered to them in English, and she whispered to them in Korean, and she told them that their grandfather in Englewood was watching from heaven and already loved them. Tasha held them next. Then the old doctor. Then, finally, Do-yoon. He held his daughter first because she was smaller. He stood in the center of the courtyard in the dawn light, under the paulownia trees his grandmother had planted, and he wept without shame in front of 4 people who loved him. Malia watched from the window of the birthing room. She was exhausted. She was radiant. She was, for the first time in her entire adult life, not responsible alone for anyone's survival. Later, when the house had gone quiet, Do-yoon came to her bedside. He laid his son in her right arm and his daughter in her left. He sat down on the floor beside the bed and rested his head against her knee. Do-yoon, she said softly. The house is very quiet. I know. Is that because the empire is gone? Or because the children are finally asleep? He laughed. It was a real laugh. She had never heard it before today. Both, he said. Both, Malia. Outside, the paulownia trees were in early bloom for the first time in 9 generations. The purple flowers fell in slow drifts across the courtyard stones, and somewhere in the branches, though nobody saw it, a small unseen bird with a long tail moved once between the leaves and was gone. The Kang line would continue, not as an empire, as a family. From an invisible seamstress with a dying mother and nothing to her name, to the woman who ended a 300-year curse and gave a lion back his soul, Malia's story is proof that the quietest hands in the room are often the ones holding the future. If the story moved you, tap that like. Share it with someone who needs to hear that loving the right person can unmake an entire empire, and subscribe to the family so you don't miss the next chapter. 9 brides were not enough. One true heart rewrote everything. See you in the next one, besties.